Hey guys, this is Trig Day 11, so this is going to be our last week of Trig, and we're only going to have 4 days of work this week. So please make sure that you guys are checking in for attendance on EDSB. That's super important that you do, so I don't have to track you down and send you messages just to make sure that you're checking in. So please make sure you're doing those attendance polls every day or for every week on EDSB. So for today, we're going to be graphing sine and cosine. So we're going to be going back a little bit to last week when we were using the unit circle, but we're only going to use the 4 main coordinates. So our 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, and then 270 degrees, and then we go back to 360. Okay, so if we're using the unit circle here, remember, these all have points. So this point here, remember, it's the unit circle, so it's 1 unit away from the center. So this point right here is going to be our 1, 0. Up at 90 is going to be 0, 1. 180 is going to be negative 1, 0. And then 270 is going to be 0, negative 1. So that's just our points from our coordinate grid. So it's 1, 0 because my x value is 1, my y value is 0. So if we remember, sine is our y value, and then cosine is our x value. Okay, so for sine, we're looking at these y values. So the way that we graph is we take our points from the unit circle here. When we graph, though, the one thing that's different, if you can see I have an example down here, is we're using radians, we're not using degrees. So we have to change everything into radians. So obviously 0 is still 0 for radians or degrees. 90 is going to be our pi over 2. 180 is pi. 270 is 3 pi over 2. And then our 360 is going to be 2 pi. Okay, so those are our normal radians that we use. You'll see these a lot. This is the general 90, 180, 270, 360. So now for sine, we said we're looking at the y value. So I'm just going to go around at 0. So 0 degrees here, 0 radians. My sine value is 0. So I have the point 0, 0 to graph sine. Then at pi over 2 or 90 degrees, my sine value is 1. So I'm going to go up 1. And there's a point there. At pi at 180, my sine value is 0 again. So now I have that point right there. So I'm just using my y values here. I'm almost going around the circle to get these points. So 3 pi over 2, 270 is going to be negative 1. So I'm down here. And then at 2 pi at 0, I'm back at 0. So when I'm connecting, it just looks like that. So that's one sine curve. And if I kept going, remember, we would just go around the circle, right? Every 90 degrees, I keep going around, around, around. So it would continue and it would keep going, and it's a wave. So this is what sine looks like, our general sine function, f of x equals sine of x. So then cosine is going to be the same thing, except we're looking at the x values. So at 0, I'm at 1. So I start up here, and I still have my pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and then 2 pi. Okay, so I still have those values because I have my 90, 180, 270, 360. So I'm starting at 1. At 90 degrees, I'm at 0. At pi, 180 degrees, I'm at negative 1. And then I just follow those values. So cosine, again, it's still a wave, but this one, you start up and then you keep going. Okay, so, and if I kept going, I could keep going and go down, and then it would continue the wave. Okay, so these are just our normal sine and cosine functions. So if you notice, the difference between these two are that sine starts in the middle, and then cosine starts up at the top. Okay, so at 0, sine starts in the middle, cosine starts up at the top. So that's an easy way to tell the difference between them. So we're going to get into our examples here. So for example number 1, this is asking us, is it sine or cosine? So I'm looking at where I'm starting. So I'm starting in the middle here. So that's definitely going to be sine. Okay, and then for my amplitude, amplitude is just your height. So we want to count, when we're counting amplitude, it's not from the top to the bottom, it's half of that. So you want the height of each wave. So you're saying like from here, how high does it get or how low does it get? Your amplitude is half of the total height. So here I'm going up 1, 2. I also go down 2. So again, you can either count from the middle or count the whole thing and divide it by 2. So the whole thing is 4. If I divide that by 2, my amplitude is going to be 2. So amplitude, again, is just your height. Okay, it's half of the height. Period is just when you complete one full wave. So for sine, I went up, down, and then back up. So when I get back to where I started, when I complete one full wave, that's 1 period. So the period of just the regular sine function is 2 pi. The period of cosine is also 2 pi. It's when I get back to where I started. Okay, so for this question here, I start at 0, and then I follow it, and here's 1 period. There's 1 sine wave. So the period is 2 pi. So it's when you complete one full wave. So here, I got back to where I started. And then I got back to where I started. So you're looking for that one complete wave. Where does it end? That's the period. For the midline, that's exactly what it sounds like. It's the middle line. It's the line that cuts it down the middle. Okay, so it's this horizontal line here. It's just the x-axis. So that's going to be y equals 0. Okay, so sine versus cosine, look at where it starts. If it starts in the middle, it's sine. If it starts up at the top, it's cosine. Amplitude is half of your total height, and then the period is when you finish one complete wave. Midline is where does it cut it in the middle. Okay, so for question number 2, sine or cosine. Again, this one is starting up at the top, so that's going to be cosine. The amplitude is half of the height. So I go from -1 to 1, so my height is 1. The period here, I'm looking at where it ends. I end at pi over 2. And then the midline, cutting it in the middle, cutting it in half. So that's, again, going to be the x-axis, which is just y equals 0. Okay. Question number 3. Again, this one looks like it's been shifted down a little bit, right? So that's not going to affect my sine or cosine amplitude period. The only thing that that's going to affect is the midline, because the middle of it is now here instead of the x-axis. So again, sine or cosine, you're looking, am I starting at the top or am I starting in the middle? So here I'm starting at the top of the wave. Okay, so this is the highest point. So that's going to be cosine. Again, amplitude, just count how high is it, divide it by 2. So my total height is 2 here because I'm going 1, 2. That's a height. Half of that is going to be 1. And remember, if we're talking about height, you can't have a negative height, so it always has to be positive. Our amplitude is always going to be positive here, and it's half of the total height. The period, where is it ending? I stop at 2 pi. Then the midline, I'm cutting it in half right here. So that's going to be y equals -1, because it's where I'm cutting it in half. I'm just naming this number here. My y is -1. Okay. For number 4, same type of thing. It's shifted a little bit, but for sine or cosine, you're seeing, okay, am I starting at the top or am I starting in the middle? And for this one, I'm starting in the middle. So this is going to be sine. Remember, amplitude, count up the total height divided by 2. So I'm going from 3 to -1. So that's a total of 4. So my amplitude is going to be 2. Period. Where is it ending? It's ending at 4 pi. Midline. Where am I cutting it in half? This one's going to be y equals 1. Okay, so sine or cosine, am I starting in the middle or am I starting at the top? Amplitude, total height divided by 2. Period, where does the one curve end? Midline, where is it cutting it in half? Okay, so go ahead, check out your homework for Trig Day 11.